We're living in a 24/7, always-on world, aren't we? A relentless barrage of notifications, endless social feeds, and the constant pressure to speak up, share our take, and make our presence known. It's what you might call the age of performative transparency, where the more we say, the more we share, the more authentic or influential we're supposed to appear. But in this never-ending flood of noise, have we completely overlooked one of the most potent, most impactful tools we actually possess? The profound power of what's left unsaid? Think about it. What if the real key to cutting through the clutter, to making a genuine impact, isn't about adding more words, but about mastering the art of strategic silence? The truth is, the most effective people out there, the leaders who truly command a room, the negotiators who consistently close the deal, the innovators who see pathways others miss, they instinctively get this. They know precisely when to hold their tongue. We're living in a 24/7, always-on world, aren't we? A relentless barrage of notifications, endless social feeds, and the constant pressure to speak up, share our take, and make our presence known. It's what you might call the age of performative transparency, where the more we say, the more we share, the more authentic or influential we're supposed to appear. But in this never-ending flood of noise, have we completely overlooked one of the most potent, most impactful tools we actually possess? The profound power of what's left unsaid? Think about it. What if the real key to cutting through the clutter, to making a genuine impact, isn't about adding more words, but about mastering the art of strategic silence? The truth is, the most effective people out there, the leaders who truly command a room, the negotiators who consistently close the deal, the innovators who see pathways others miss, they instinctively get this. They know precisely when to hold their tongue. For them, silence isn't just an empty space, it's a carefully wielded instrument, a powerful weapon in one moment, a formidable shield in the next, and often, the master key to unlocking their most critical objectives. For them, silence isn't just an empty space, it's a carefully wielded instrument, a powerful weapon in one moment, a formidable shield in the next, and often, the master key to unlocking their most critical objectives. Now, this isn't some trendy new life hack. Go back centuries, and you'll find Niccolò Machiavelli, one of history's most sharp-eyed, and yes, often controversial, observers of human nature and power, understood this principle to his core. While he's widely known, perhaps even infamous, for his work, The Prince, some of Machiavelli's deepest insights lie in the unspoken, in recognizing that a deliberate, calculated silence can speak volumes, often more strategically than any torrent of words. Though his name is frequently mired in misunderstanding, his timeless grasp of how people tick and how influence truly works is as relevant today as it was in the 16th century. He knew that sometimes, the most commanding presence, the most powerful move, is simply knowing the profound value of quiet. So, we've established that silence isn't just an empty void, it's a deliberate, strategic choice, often a powerful one. But let's flip the coin. What's the real downside of all this talking, this relentless drive to share that's so ingrained in our modern culture? If Machiavelli were here today, he'd probably tell you the price is far steeper than we realize. In fact, he'd likely view our current obsession with radical transparency and constant communication not as some enlightened path, but as a form of strategic self-sabotage. First off, your words can become chains, while silence preserves your freedom. Think about it. Every time you publicly declare an intention, broadcast a plan, or even voice a strong opinion, you're essentially handcuffing yourself to that position. If circumstances shift, or you simply have a better idea later, changing course makes you look inconsistent, unreliable, or like a classic flip-flopper. Machiavelli, always the clear-eyed realist, knew that blindly sticking to a promise could be disastrous if the situation changed. By keeping your plans closer to your chest, by choosing silence on your next big move, you hang on to something invaluable: the freedom to adapt, to pivot, to recalibrate without needing to issue a press release or navigate a storm of public judgment. We see this play out all the time with brands built on specific public declarations on social media, or even in our personal lives, with commitments made in the heat of the moment that later become heavy burdens. Silence, in this sense, is pure agility. Second, your words often lay your entire playbook bare, while silence keeps your strategic cards close to your vest. The more you explain, the more you justify, the more you're not just revealing what you're thinking, but how your mind works, your assumptions, your limitations, your blind spots. You're essentially giving away free intelligence, a roadmap that others can use to anticipate your moves, counter your strategies, or even subtly manipulate you. Machiavelli once observed, "The first method for estimating the intelligence of a ruler is to look at the men he has around him." We could easily adapt that for today. One of the quickest ways to gauge someone's strategic acumen is to listen to how much they unnecessarily reveal. Picture the nervous job candidate who overexplains every answer, inadvertently highlighting their deepest insecurities. Or the startup founder at a networking event who, in a burst of enthusiasm, details their entire innovative concept, only to find a competitor has mysteriously launched a similar product months later. Strategic silence is about protecting your most valuable intellectual property, your unplayed hand. And third, constant chatter can dilute your presence and erode your authority, whereas calculated silence can actually build it. Machiavelli famously wrote that it's safer to be feared than loved, if one must choose. Now, feared might sound a bit harsh to our 21st century ears, but think of it more as commanding deep respect, a certain gravitas, an undeniable presence. And that kind of respect often thrives on a degree of distance, an element of mystique. The leader who feels compelled to explain every minor decision, to justify every single action, to share every fleeting thought, eventually becomes, well, ordinary. And as Machiavelli understood, the ordinary rarely inspires fierce loyalty or wields significant influence. Think of the manager whose constant stream of directives and explanations just fades into background noise, or the public figure whose non-stop, unfiltered sharing makes them predictable and commonplace rather than compelling and iconic. Their words lose impact precisely because there are too many of them. So, when you add it all up, the lost flexibility, the exposed vulnerabilities, the diminished authority, Machiavelli would likely look at our modern compulsion for constant connection and over-the-top transparency and call it what it often is, a significant strategic blunder. A voluntary, unforced surrender of personal power and leverage, often traded for the fleeting validation of simply being heard or being seen as open. First up, we have the information gatherer's silence. You could call this your strategic reconnaissance mode. Machiavelli had a principle that essentially says, "A wise person gets done immediately what a fool puts off until the end." How does this apply here? Well, the fool often jumps right in, blurts out their thoughts, reveals their entire hand, and learns very little in the process. The truly savvy operator, however, plays it differently. They initially hold back. They use that silence as a space for others to talk, to lay out their intentions, their arguments, their vulnerabilities, before they make their own move. This creates what strategists call an asymmetric information advantage. You're essentially on a fact-finding mission, collecting invaluable intelligence and getting a clearer read on the entire landscape, all while your own cards remain hidden. You see this play out constantly in high-stakes negotiations. There's a good reason for the old adage, whoever speaks first often loses. By letting the other side state their terms or their price first, you gain a crucial baseline without revealing your own limits or desperation. In our personal lives, the individual who genuinely listens more than they speak, who is comfortable with pauses, often develops a much deeper, more accurate understanding of the people and dynamics around them. And in any competitive field, from launching a new product to crafting a political campaign, broadcasting your entire strategy before you act is rarely a winning move. Those who keep their game plan under wraps until the decisive moment typically have the upper hand. This silence isn't passive, it's a state of intense listening and potent observation. Next in our arsenal is the authority builder's silence. Machiavelli was a master at understanding that power isn't just about the raw force you can wield, it's profoundly shaped by perception. And perception, he knew, can be significantly amplified by calculated, deliberate quiet. He famously advised that a leader needs the cunning of a fox to recognize traps and the strength of a lion to scare off wolves. A crucial part of that fox-like shrewdness is knowing precisely when opening your mouth actually undercuts your authority rather than bolstering it. Here's the psychology behind it. Human nature tends to fill a void. When you speak selectively, when you're not constantly interjecting or feeling the need to have an opinion on everything, people often project onto that silence. They might assume deeper thought, greater control, or more significant wisdom than you're overtly signaling. Consequently, when someone who is typically reserved does speak, their words carry disproportionately more weight. They're treated as more significant. Think of the CEO who rarely speaks in large meetings, but when they do, everyone leans in. Their pronouncements can shift the entire direction of the company. Or consider the seasoned expert who doesn't jump into every minor debate, but when they offer their carefully considered perspective, it's regarded as definitive. This is a stark contrast to the individual who anxiously fills every conversational gap or feels compelled to comment on every issue. Their contributions, however valid, risk becoming diluted or ignored. This kind of strategic silence projects an unshakable confidence, an unspoken assertion that your position is strong enough not to require constant verbal defense. Finally, there's the ambiguity preserver's silence, which you might call the strategist's haze. This is perhaps the most classically Machiavellian of the three, but its strategic utility is undeniable. Machiavelli's well-known assertion that it is safer to be feared than loved, when one of the two must be lacking, isn't just a simplistic endorsement of ruling by fear. It speaks to a broader strategic principle. In situations of uncertainty or complex dynamics, maintaining a degree of ambiguity about your precise intentions or ultimate position can be highly advantageous. By artfully refusing to prematurely clarify every detail of your stance, you accomplish several key things. You allow different parties to project their own hopes, anxieties, or interpretations onto your silence, which can broaden your appeal or keep potential adversaries guessing. You retain maximum flexibility and freedom of action, as you haven't yet locked yourself into a narrow, unchangeable course. And, crucially, you preserve a degree of deniability if circumstances shift unexpectedly, because you never explicitly committed to one rigid interpretation. We see politicians employ this constantly, crafting statements that are open enough for diverse audiences to find resonance. Master negotiators use it by sidestepping early, definitive commitments that could unnecessarily limit the scope of potential agreements. And visionary leaders often articulate a compelling, overarching vision while intentionally leaving the specific how-to details open, fostering innovation and buy-in without getting bogged down in premature specifics that could alienate support or prove impractical later. Now, it's vital to underscore, as Machiavelli himself would likely agree, this isn't about being deceptive or intentionally misleading. It's a sophisticated recognition that forcing absolute clarity too early in the game can often be strategically self-defeating. Sometimes, allowing a little fog to linger is the smartest way to keep all your options viable and your long-term objectives protected. These three distinct modes of silence, for gathering intelligence, for building authority, and for preserving strategic ambiguity, are potent tools. And like any sophisticated instrument, their true power lies in understanding precisely when and how to deploy each one to maximum effect. First, silence creates a potent space for projection. Our minds, quite simply, are wired to be uncomfortable with voids, with unanswered questions, with lingering quiet. When faced with an unexpected or extended silence, especially in a situation with any underlying tension, people instinctively try to fill that emptiness. And what do they fill it with? Not necessarily objective facts, but with the contents of their own minds, their anxieties, their hopes, their biases, their unspoken assumptions. As they talk to break the silence, they often reveal far more about their own position, their insecurities, or their true desires than they ever intended, or than you could have extracted with direct questioning. Think of the classic image of a skilled interrogator. They don't just rely on rapid-fire questions. They strategically use long, unnerving pauses. The discomfort often compels the subject to volunteer information just to end the quiet. Similarly, in a high-stakes negotiation, the side that can comfortably hold a silence after an offer has been made or a tough question asked frequently watches the other side start to squirm, to qualify their stance, or even to offer concessions simply to break that tense, unnerving quiet. You're essentially allowing their own internal monologue to become your intelligence briefing. Second, silence subtly yet decisively reshapes power dynamics. In most conversations, meetings, or public forums, the person who speaks first, most frequently, or at the greatest length often subconsciously signals that they're seeking something: approval, validation, a specific reaction. They are, in a subtle way, auditioning for the listener's attention or agreement. Conversely, the individual who speaks less, who listens with focused intent, who chooses their words with deliberate precision, or who only weighs in after others have laid out their positions, implicitly claims a different, often more powerful role: that of the keen observer, the thoughtful judge, the one holding court rather than the one petitioning it. This isn't necessarily about overt, aggressive dominance. It's about a subtle but significant shift in perceived authority and control. Consider the job interview. Often, the candidate who asks more insightful, targeted questions and listens intently to the answers comes across as more confident, more in command, than the one who simply delivers a long, uninterrupted monologue about themselves. Or think of that quiet individual in a chaotic brainstorming session. When they finally offer a contribution, it's often given more weight, more serious consideration, than the constant stream of ideas from more vocal participants. Silence, in these contexts, allows you to control the conversational tempo and, frequently, the perceived hierarchy within the room. And third, silence cultivates an aura of mystique that, in turn, amplifies perceived power and authority. Machiavelli, with his characteristic astuteness, observed that men judge generally more by the eye than by the hand, for everyone can see, but few can feel. In today's terms, we might say that people often form judgments based on surface appearances and overall perceptions rather than on a deep, tangible understanding of all the facts. What we cannot fully see, what isn't completely laid bare and explained away, often appears more formidable, more intriguing, or more inherently capable than what is completely exposed and familiar. The person who feels the need to reveal every thought, every motive, every insecurity, every step of their plan, eventually becomes predictable, perhaps even ordinary. But the individual who practices selective disclosure, who keeps certain aspects of their thinking or their strategy in reserve, retains an element of compelling mystery. This isn't about engaging in deceit. It's a shrewder understanding that this very mystique can magnify their perceived capabilities and their overall influence. Think of the effective leader who shares decisive conclusions and clear directives but often keeps the complex, sometimes messy, deliberative process behind those decisions private. They frequently maintain an air of confident authority that a leader who overexplains every detail might inadvertently lose. This measured reserve makes their actions seem more deliberate, their insights more profound, their presence more commanding. These psychological currents are always swirling beneath the surface of our interactions. Mastering strategic silence means you're no longer just passively caught in them. You're learning to recognize, navigate, and even subtly direct these forces to your distinct advantage. Okay, let's transition from understanding the why of strategic silence to the how. Knowing the theory is one thing, but actually practicing the discipline of silence in our hyper-connected, constantly chattering world? That takes conscious effort and skill. But like any skill, it can be cultivated. Think of these as core principles from the Machiavellian playbook, adapted for today, to help you start transforming silence from a mere absence of sound into a potent, active tool in your communication arsenal. First, principle number 1. Prioritize listening to forge an information advantage. This is fundamental. Before you even think about sharing your perspective, launching your argument, or unveiling your brilliant idea, make it your absolute mission to thoroughly understand where everyone else stands. This means consciously shifting your default mode from transmit to receive. Actively practice asking more insightful questions than you make declarative statements. Train yourself to listen not just to the explicit words being spoken, but also for the subtle nuances, the hesitations, the body language, the things left unsaid, because that's often where the richest insights, the real tells, are hidden. Machiavelli, in his famous analogy, advised that an effective leader must embody both the cunning of a fox to recognize hidden traps and the strength of a lion to deter open threats. That crucial, fox-like cunning always begins with astute observation and meticulous information gathering, often conducted in quiet observation while others are busy laying all their cards on the table. This isn't about being manipulative, it's about being strategically aware, about getting a clear read of the terrain before you make your decisive move. Next up, principle number 2. Cultivate strategic ambiguity when premature clarity would box you in. This can feel a bit counterintuitive in a culture that often demands instant answers, black and white certainty, and full disclosure right now. But the reality is, there are many situations where being crystal clear too early in the game can severely limit your options, invite unwarranted criticism before your ideas are fully formed, or paint you into a strategic corner you can't easily escape. Machiavelli wisely cautioned that a prudent leader should be slow to believe and to act, nor should he himself show fear. This slowness, this deliberate pause before fully committing or revealing every last detail, isn't about indecisiveness or weakness. It's about consciously preserving your freedom of action, your critical ability to adapt as new information flows in or as the situation evolves. Think of a visionary CEO articulating a bold, inspiring future for the company, but intentionally leaving some of the specific how we'll get there operational details open for broader input, innovation, and adaptation. Or, in managing a complex project, avoiding unnecessary, rigid specifics at the outset can allow for more creative problem-solving and flexibility as unforeseen challenges arise. It's about maintaining strategic agility by not over-defining things before it's absolutely necessary. And finally, principle number 3, learn to wield silence itself as a position of genuine power. Let's be perfectly honest. Most of us find prolonged, unexpected silence in a conversation, especially a tense or high-stakes one, deeply uncomfortable. Our almost universal human instinct is to rush in and fill that void, often by talking too much, inadvertently revealing more than we intended, or even making concessions we didn't actually need to make, just to alleviate the awkwardness. The key here is to consciously reframe that discomfort and, through deliberate practice, to actually become comfortable in those silent moments, to own them. Start small. In your next negotiation, after you clearly state your position or your terms, just pause. Bite your tongue if you have to, but resist that powerful urge to immediately qualify your statement, soften it, or add more justifications. Let your words hang in the air. Let them land with their full weight. In a conflict or a difficult conversation, make a commitment to fully, completely, and respectfully listen to the other person's entire point, without interruption, before you even begin to formulate your response. And if you're in a leadership position, practice delivering important decisions or critical messages with clarity and conviction, but without feeling the need to over-explain or over-justify every single rationale. Trust that your decision, if it's well-reasoned, can and will stand on its own merits. This isn't about being cold, dismissive, or aloof. It's about projecting a quiet, unshakable confidence that often resonates far more powerfully than 1,000 defensive or unnecessary words. Mastering these principles isn't about transforming into a silent, uncommunicative hermit. It's about evolving into a more discerning, more impactful, and ultimately, more strategic communicator, someone who truly understands that sometimes the most powerful thing you can articulate is nothing at all. Alright, as we bring this journey into the world of strategic silence to a close, let's be crystal clear about what this Machiavellian approach truly means. And, just as importantly, what it doesn't. This isn't about becoming a shrinking violet or disengaging from the world. Far from it. True strategic silence isn't simply the absence of words. It's the deliberate, skillful mastery of when and how to use them, and when to let the power of quiet do the heavy lifting. It's about choosing to speak only when your words will genuinely serve a clear purpose, when they will advance your objectives more effectively than your silence ever could. It's the art of creating a powerful, intentional contrast between what you choose to reveal and what you strategically and wisely keep in reserve. In our modern landscape, absolutely saturated with noise, where it feels like almost everyone is compelled to broadcast every fleeting thought, every opinion, every minor update, the individual who practices this kind of selective, discerning communication inherently stands apart. Their words, when they finally do arrive, land with significantly greater weight, precisely because they are chosen with such evident care and deployed with such focused precision. Now, let's be real, this isn't easy. It demands a level of patience, deep self-control, and a keen, almost intuitive strategic awareness, qualities that are, frankly, increasingly rare in our culture of instant gratification and constant, often unthinking, expression. This is the discipline of a true strategic thinker, a master of their own communication. And herein lies a fascinating, almost ironic truth. Often, the most successful practitioners of this silent art, the real virtuosos, remain largely unrecognized for their subtle methods. Our attention is naturally drawn to the loud, the overtly expressive, the radically transparent. But the masters of strategic silence? They quietly achieve their objectives, they secure their wins, often without drawing any undue attention to how they actually orchestrated their success. They are, in essence, the ones who are quietly prevailing while many others are still loudly proclaiming their intentions to someday win. This brings us full circle, back to Niccolò Machiavelli himself. Perhaps it's time, once and for all, to look beyond the simplistic, often cartoonish caricature of him as merely a cynical teacher of ruthless manipulation. What his timeless insights truly offer is a remarkably profound understanding of human psychology, of the intricate dance of power dynamics, of the subtle, often invisible currents that truly shape our interactions. He recognized, with startling clarity, that genuine, sustainable influence doesn't always require brute force, overt persuasion, or elaborate deception. Sometimes, its most potent form simply requires the wisdom to know when to be quiet, when to observe intently, and when to allow others, through their own words or actions, to reveal themselves. So, in this modern age of relentless information overload, pervasive opinion saturation, and almost compulsive sharing, Machiavelli's ancient strategy of silence offers a powerful, if admittedly counterintuitive, pathway to genuine influence and lasting effectiveness. The call to action, then, is not a call to silence in the sense of voicelessness, but a challenge to cultivate a more potent voice through strategic restraint. Aim to speak less but with far greater impact. Sharpen your powers of observation. Practice selective disclosure. And above all, let your results, your actions, your achievements ultimately speak louder and more convincingly than your words ever could. Because in the endless, often exhausting competition for attention, for influence, for a meaningful say in the world, those who master this ancient art don't just participate, they consistently, and often quietly, prevail.